a question for you, Breht. Have you ever just straight up had a bad trip, nothing gained from it absolutely whatsoever?
Yeah, for sure. I remember on acid one time, we had like a liquid acid that a friend of mine gave me a bunch of hits, and it was just I think I might have mentioned this before, but it was just an experience of pure sensory static. So there was no there was no sitting down, no contemplation, no reflection. It was just like my whole body was staticky, and I paced for like 4 hours back and forth, just wanting it to stop. I absolutely got nothing from that. Maybe it was a bad batch. Maybe it was, shitty product. I don't exactly know. I've never had that sort of experience before or since on LSD. On mushrooms, they almost always have some revelation. I mean, if you are doing it recreationally with friends just to get fucked up, I think that you probably don't come away with much. You're just having fun. But I think if you sit down with a certain sort of intention in the right setting and a sort of sacred respect for the thing, that you'll get something out of it. I introduced mushrooms to a friend of mine in the last year or so, and he had never done it before. And he talked about a really fascinating and kind of intense experience with his own ego, where he, kind of has an ego that is pretty harsh, low self-worth. And when he did the mushrooms and he went and laid down, he came face to face with the cruelty of his ego. And he just felt like he was being shouted out by his own ego, like you're shit, you're nothing, you're worthless, you're whatever, tearing him down, all of his insecurities. And it was just like an unpleasant experience of having your own ego yell at you, but there was that separation between him and his ego. And he said it for a little bit after it like went crazy, screaming at him and stuff. It like dropped away, and he said, I felt for the first time, I've always heard, he's talking to me, like I've always heard you talk about like meditation and not identifying with your thoughts and the self dropping away. And he's like, after I was laying in my bed, the ego screaming at me, tearing me down, saying all the low self-worth stories in my head. And when it stopped, it broke open, and I didn't identify with it anymore. And it was sort of, I started laughing out loud, because I saw that this little voice in my head that is so harsh and critical is not me, and it fell away. And so, he came out of that, and I remember like hugging him, and he was like crying after that experience. But it was a good experience because he came face to face with the ugliness of his ego, and then at the end of, like, the mushrooms almost showed him, the cruelty of his ego, and then let the ego drop away to see what it would be in the absence of it. And so we got to see that contrast of hardcore, harsh fucking egoism, and then the lack, like the mushrooms say, peekaboo, here's your ego. It's fucking super harsh and cruel and low self-worth and all this self-critical bullshit. And then this is what it feels like when it's gone. And he's like, I would just like by myself in my room laughing out loud at how absurd the ego is. And so that was the lesson that the mushroom trip needed to show him that time, that his ego is too critical. His inner voice is too harsh. He has to have compassion for himself, and he got a little break from it.